Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to our morning coffee time. My cup feels deliciously warm and tasty this morning, and I was just reflecting on the donor who sent 3 bags of coffee from a company called Good. So I have a good cup of coffee this morning. And that's probably bad monk humor. So welcome to Friday, May the 8th. It is shocking how fast the time moves. And there is only a couple more days until our retreat with Ajahn Sona ends. But it's been really just a wonderful time. I'm delighted to see so many people participating. I sent a note this morning to Dantika at Birkin, who's editor-in-chief of the video productions there. And I think they're looking forward to a little break. It's taken a heroic effort up there to pull this off. And one of the talks almost didn't make it if it wasn't for a last-ditch effort driving into Kamloops and uploading it. We might have broken the regularity of the evening talks. But as I said to her, it's really a beautiful effort, and I think it honors the beauty of Ajahn life and practice and the beauty of the Dhamma. And it's great to see hundreds of people taking the time to tune in and practice and benefit from those now. And I imagine tens of thousands will in the future. Oh, there's Dantika now. So her given name is Dinka. Her Buddhist name is Dantika. So if you want to share your appreciation, she's there in the chat right now. She's changed her moniker to Dinka's Bits and Pieces. So also, I thank all of you for not just tuning in to these coffee times in the morning and expressing your gratitude and appreciation for this offering. Like so much, I think, of what is cold and uninviting and almost dehumanizing about online content is sometimes the anonymity and the lack of interaction that some of it all has. And I would have a difficult time just sitting here talking to my web camera with a bunch of wires and audio interfaces and lights going on, and in my office. So you two are definitely part of this, and it's good to see so many of my friends and neighbors joining into these in the morning time. So the theme of last night's talk was mindfulness of the mind. And the thing that stood out for me most strongly was Ajahn's ability to simplify that practice. There oftentimes can be a lot of confusion. Ajahn Pasano is often fond of saying sometimes we like to complicate things. And there's even a passage in Sutta where the Buddha sort of says, others delight in complication. We delight in simplicity. And the truth is I delight in both ends of the spectrum when it comes to the Dhamma teachings. I'm so grateful for the Sutta Pitaka. Sometimes we talk of it as the Sutta treasury because it really is just a treasure from what now seems like the ancient world. 2,600 years ago in India, the Buddha lived and walked around the Magadhan plains and shared his insight and inspired people sufficiently that sanghas and communities grew up, and people took the time to commit his teachings to memory, and an oral tradition grew up that preserved this vast treasury. And there's almost nothing like it in the whole world. And it's amazing how much of it has been preserved and survived so that it can benefit future generations, including us here in this time. So I delight in the all the efforts. I mean, just think about how many human hours have gone into making it possible that one can connect with those teachings. It's incalculable, really. 2,600 years. What would that be? 130 generations. Doing math live on YouTube is probably not a wise move. It's easy to make an error by a factor of 10. But it is astounding and it is amazing that the teachings of that time in such breadth and depth could be passed along. They provided sufficient interest and sufficient usefulness and utility to people's lives for something just shy of 3 millennium at this point, a few hundred years shy of that. So I don't want to trivialize that, but that is that's a beautiful, beautiful, amazing kind of thing in this world. And that it speaks to us in our lives and the conditions of our lives is amazing as well. But as I've said before, not all of it is necessarily speaking to us or even needed at any one time. And we should be involved in this grand creative kind of effort to study the Dhamma sufficiently so that it speaks to our experience as human beings and is something as practicable. Others are focused on preserving the detail and elucidating the detail and studying commentaries, and but the thing that I think characterizes most strongly Ajahn Chah and his communities, and indeed forced monks of the Thai tradition, is the focus and effort on practice. And it doesn't take much. You don't need a lot of teachings necessarily. But of course, there's a tricky balance in finding a way to simplify without getting it wrong, and simplify in a way that still is effective for realizing the full benefits of the practice. So, and I imagine most of you all listened to Ajahn talk last night, but he was reflecting on just the brilliance of how the Buddha sort of uses this fairly binary system of looking at the mind, which is so useful when troubleshooting or engaging with something as complex as the mind or even other systems. And there's something about the value of even the language that you find there. Like, one is mindful of whether or not certain states are present or absent. And it reminds me of much of the language of the canon, and sometimes people find fault with it because they really would like more definition on both ends of the scale, like please explain positively sort of what this is and positively what this isn't. And there's a efficiency in just this other way that the Buddha sort of talks about it. It applies to how we think of various states of mind. Like I oftentimes in conversation with people, there's a little bit of confusion and frustration about defining what metta bhavana is, or the cultivation of loving kindness. And to me, the surest way to define it is non-ill will. So like so it's a range of emotion that is completely opposite to and absent ill will. Many of the precepts are defined in a fairly kind of constrained way, and defined by sort of what constitutes the negative kind of action, and without sort of elucidating sort of all the positive range of actions. So, and this very practical way to sort of engage with complex things, as Ajahn points out, and especially sort of in dealing with something as slippery as the mind, just the bare kind of noting of these states. Something I appreciate from Ajahn Sumedho's teaching is something akin to this chittanupassana practice, or mindfulness of the mind. In many instances, he highlights how it is that we're very much kind of focused on what's present and what's coming, and we're kind of loath to notice what has passed, what has ceased, and what is absent. And to me, it kind of even relates to other sort of dynamics of practice, such as gratitude. We can spend so much of our life focused on what we want, what we desire, what we wish for, what we expect, that we forget to reflect on what we have and move back into this place of noticing what is and what is absent, what is thankfully absent. Sometimes with gatherings like this, I sometimes sort of say, I appreciate everyone who showed up, and especially those who didn't. And when you reflect on the kind of mischief that happens in chat rooms and online, it takes on a whole extra dimension. So I appreciate who showed up, and I'm mindful of who hasn't shown up. And that's a blessing too. So I just want to underscore how practical sort of this approach is to working with the mind. And Ajahn also contextualizes it sort of as, he puts it in pretty stark terms in his Dhamma talk, like this is not to be drawn out and practiced in isolation. It sits within the Satipatthana. It sits within the whole cultivation of the Eightfold Path. And in doing so, it is a important kind of component in developing the practice. So, and it's something that we can do. It's very approachable. There's all kinds of ways that we can tie ourselves in knots trying to develop mindfulness of the mind and a better understanding of our mind. The mind is so fast, fleeting, complex. Many aspects of thought and consciousness are so ephemeral that having a matrix, a classification system, and formalizing some of the way that we're examining the mind, at least for part of our day, part of our practice, has great usefulness. And there's value both to being skilled in recognizing the presence and the absence of these things. So I see some extra friends popping in here. Okay, well, it's just a short little reflection. I've been going long with reflections for the last several days, and I know some of you like that, but I'd like to also just look for share other kind of comments or impressions that people have on Ajahns talk last night. So I'm gonna take a sip of coffee here and look in the comments to see if there's anything I've missed here. Mostly looks like a lot of good cheer and friendliness, which is welcome. Let's see, Nadine Santi. What a beautiful name and a beautiful flower. Good morning, all. I have a follow-up reflection on our Vedana discussions. It's long for the chat. I've pasted a link below to these thoughts. I hope that's appropriate. It may be helpful to some. Nadine, I think it's stripped out your link. I don't think that links are allowed in these YouTube chats. So you might just have to describe it or email me. Maybe I can share it another day. I see the chat blocks that link. Okay, yeah. So she's got that. How to share 3 paragraphs. It's a bit difficult with chat, Nadine. So if you can condense it down to 1 maybe, or just send me the link and I can share it in tomorrow's chat. That might be one way. Alexander, do you recommend timing your meditations? Sometimes yes, sometimes no, Alexander. So it's good to overcome the fickleness of the mind and the habit of just doing what's easy and comfortable to time your meditations. Also, part of commitment structures, I think, of effective commitment structures is they should be specific and measured. And it just frees you up from a whole secondary consideration, which can become a distraction when you're meditating or really doing anything. So, there's great benefit in just figuring out an appropriate level of time to meditate, Alexander, and then just make that commitment, and then you don't have to think about it. So, even as a senior monk, oftentimes our task is the timekeeper in the meditations. And in the last few years, I've just set an alarm for the morning and evening meditations that I have with the monks. It's just on my phone, and I don't have to think about it. We show up and we meditate at the agreed time, and I don't have to be watching the clock through the meditation. It just goes off at the appointed time. So, and it's nice. But one also might be limiting oneself by setting a time all the time. So it is nice and something to experiment with. Just sitting and carve out a certain amount of time and sit and explore that. Oftentimes when we do retreat in the monastery, and also when we do the retreats up at Birkin with Ajahn Sona, we have these blocks of time to practice in the morning and the afternoon. And for those there's no set time, there's no bell. People are encouraged to gather and practice sitting and walking meditation. And then many people have noted how beneficial that has been for them, as it differs from what you find in a lot of retreats and meditation centers where you have very regular sittings for 45 minutes or an hour. And some people find themselves sitting longer because there isn't this predetermined bell or time session. So, and they're just tuning in more to causes and conditions. And so experiment with both. There's value in both is really my encouragement there. Let's see. Yeah, also I noticed you have a new icon, Alexander. Thank you. That's nice. Technology is not self. Let's see. One more from Alexander. Are there any Buddhist Facebook groups for this retreat or the like? No, we don't have one. Not to my knowledge. There might be one just started by other people. But I don't spend time on Facebook. And I don't think Ajahn does as well. Well, this is June sort of has shared this. Kusala is in the chat room this morning, and she is the designer and creator of that beautiful Buddha image that you see sitting behind Ajahn. Kusala lived at Birken for a long spell and designed and painted that, and it's been a wonderful addition to the Dhamma Hall, and it's now Ajahn's favorite place to sit when he gives teachings. And I love the graphic, and I love how it frames him. And I have to say these talks are just beautifully conceived and recorded. It makes it a delight. Good morning, Brandon. How do you correctly develop dispassion? Well, when was it? 2 days ago, when we were talking about feeling recently, I'm not sure of the day, there's this interesting phrase that the Buddha brings up in several suttas where he's talking about sensuality, and he applies it to a few different sets of dhammas, but I think it's useful in setting the right attitude towards developing dispassion. And the Buddha says, one needs to understand what the gratification is in sense contact and in the sense realm. What is the danger and what is the escape? So Buddha doesn't just advocate some sort of dogmatic or negative sort of casting of sensuality. I mean, he affirms that, there is pleasant sights and sounds and smells and touches and tastes, and there's different interludes that he has with people that are not monastics and haven't made a higher commitment to a renunciate life, where he affirms that, for many people of the world, and even people that have faith in Dhamma and faith in practice, a certain amount of pleasure in the sense realm is not blameworthy. But even for somebody like that, he says one should reflect on what is the gratification, what is the danger, and what is the escape. And the Buddha encourages restraint and a certain amount of renunciation. And in those particular teachings, oftentimes you see him counseling one to from time to time reflect on the downside of having this kind of addiction to sense desires and sense pleasures. And the way I talk about it to myself and others is, um, if we're overly invested in that being our strategy for happiness and well-being, then there's a tremendous liability there. So, and that's just one aspect of the danger. Um, and there's others. I mean, we're always in competition with others in the world if we give undue importance to sense pleasure, because there's only so many apples in the store, uh, and engaging in the sense realm oftentimes is a win-lose game. So, anyways, reflecting on the drawbacks, the defect, uh, in time, one starts to correct and move from a place of passion to dispassion. So somebody has no wisdom whatsoever can be completely enamored and passionate. And, from a Buddhist perspective, we see that as delusion. And passionate is a state of delusion. And many people who are unfamiliar with Dhamma would completely disagree with this. They think life is all about finding your passion and getting excited about that which one finds delightful and pleasant. And the Buddha says you're to be passionate, if we're kind of correlating that with the Dhamma word that correlates with this word dispassion here, is to be deluded. And to be dispassionate is to be clear-sighted. So dispassion is not a rejection of or a negativity or a nihilistic standpoint. That's not what the Buddha is encouraging. He's encouraging you to move to a position from delusion to clear-sightedness. And once one is clear-sighted, then they're experiencing a dispassion, which I call divestment. You're not invested in sense pleasures in the same way that one formerly was. You're not afraid of the pleasant. You realize that sense experience quite naturally is imbued with positive and negative sort of feelings, but you feed elsewhere. Your sense of well-being and happiness is not dependent upon it or bound up by that. And that really supports a greater sense of peace and ultimately freedom. So, George, please share the history, tradition, and practice of bowing before monastics. Well, I'm not sure I know the whole history of it or tradition. I can speak to the modern practice of it, George. Certainly, it probably existed in South Indian or South Asian culture long before the Buddha. The culture that he was born into had great reverence for religious teachers and spiritual seekers, and but also, it's a practice in many Asian cultures, even absent sort of a religious context. Even in Thailand to these days, there are ceremonies where you will bow to king or royalty or bow to your grandparents or your parents. And I think the same is true of other Asian cultures and societies, even up to modern day. So I think the history sort of comes out of Asian culture, and in Buddhism, of course, South Asian culture. And it's a way of lifting up, like humbling you. You're bowing and humbling yourself before that which you revere. So, people would do this to the Buddha. Even people that hadn't yet converted to Buddhism, sometimes they would encounter the Buddha and recognizing him as somebody who was a samana, a seeker of peace. They bow to that. And so it's not always fraught with personality. And like this is something that I learned ordaining in Thailand. Our culture sees things in a very hyper personal way. And so myself and many of the people that ordained in the monastery had a little bit of a problem with this when we first ordained. Sometimes you're just new, barely in robes, and haven't yet developed much that seems worthy of honor. And the lay people come to the monastery, and if a more senior monk isn't there, they just pick any sort of robed person to practice paying their respects to the sangha, and that's part of the culture there. Or even walking down a road or walking through the village to gather alms, people would often stop and pause and kind of squat down. They might not bow, sort of like head touching the ground, but they would maybe get off their bicycle when they see the monks coming and kind of crouch down or just stop and let the monks pass. And that's almost like a bow as well. And it's just a way to kind of practice conveying respect and reverence for that which you hold dear. And in Northeast Thailand, where our tradition is rooted, the populace in general has great reverence for Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. And the Sangha is the living manifestation of the Triple Gem. So Ajahn Chah added a little extra dimension to that. It's a way to stop and slow down and reflect on Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, and also reestablish mindfulness in a very physical, beautiful gesture. So, and I've talked about that other times, there's a shrine in your dwelling place, and there's a shrine in most rooms in the monastery. And anytime you come and leave a space, including your dwelling, or you come into the presence of the teacher, you take time to slow down, stop, pause, set your things aside, and then bow 3 times, very mindfully. And it's great. It interrupts the kind of heedless flow of being and doing. So, all right. Well, I see there's a whole pile of comments I'm not going to get to today because we've run out of time. But there is always tomorrow if the bits flow and we still have breath. So thank you all for joining me today, and I hope you have a good day and a good retreat experience today. We're moving close to the ending of this, so today is Friday. We just have 3 more days of this retreat. I'm going to continue these morning coffee times for the foreseeable future. I'm not quite sure what's going to happen when we resume walking alms round, but at this point, I don't think we'll do that for at least over another month. But we'll see. Most of the states are gradually moving towards resuming a certain amount of normal activities. So, all right. Thank you all, and I hope you have a good day, and I hope to see you tomorrow morning again. Be well.